Welcome to the Make and Pass show. And we're pretty stoked to be returning to our dog-eared dialogue series. This is, if you don't know, a series where we review good books. And it's much more strict than our Brews and Review series. Because Brews and Reviews, we just try beer and watch movies regardless of we know it's going to be good or not. And then we give our takes. We've had bad beers. We've had bad movies. We've had excellent beers and excellent movies. But dog-eared dialogues, because a book is so much more of an investment, we're only going to be going over books that we really, really enjoy. So
like the two thumbers.
Yeah, like books that I give 2 thumbs up and would recommend anyone to read. And with that, we have the Buffalo Hunter.
Did you misspeak? Did you repeat yourself?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
And it's actually it's my only critique of this book. I wish the second word wouldn't have been hunter again. I wish it would have been the Pagani word for hunter. Or, one of the funniest things I think is when I can't remember. I think it was Pacific Rim. And there was there was a mech in that called Jaeger Hunter, which Jaeger is just German for hunter. But at least it covers it up a little bit, you know what I mean? And I kind of wish that they would have done the same. Well, Stephen Graham Jones would have done the same thing for the title. Because the Buffalo Hunter, my knee-jerk reaction when I heard about it, I was like, sounds cringe. Sounds like anime. And it's anything but. You know what I mean? But anyways, the Buffalo Hunter kids. Ken, thanks for joining us today. If you're not interested in reading or listening to books on Audible like we do, that's totally okay. You can go ahead and skip to the next episode.
Or you can get the breakdown from us here, the short version. So if you want to listen to it,
this will be shorter than the book itself.
But the title, I think it grew on me and I liked it because I did feel like I did know kind of out the gate. Maybe I felt like I knew what I was in for, which I did, which I realized I wasn't completely wrong, but there was a big piece I was wrong about.
Did you read it after I recommended it to you?
0 reviews, 0
you
summaries,
didn't read the description of
0 descriptions.
Because I didn't want to spoil it.
I just hit download and play, and I was like, "Oh, let's go." Okay, I think I know who the Buffalo Hunter is. I think I know what that is.
I'm glad you trusted me because I literally just came to you one day at church. I'm also tilting this table. I'm flipping this table.
Will your chair go down?
Well, I don't want it to, because if it does, then the arms don't stay under the chair.
Oh, okay.
Under the table, and then I just am tilting back and falling backwards.
All right.
No, all right, fine. I'll lower them.
Just a hair.
There we go. Right there.
Stay right there. All right.
Right there. But anyways, I see Pat at church. I'm like, yo, hey, I'm actually listening to this book right now while I'm sitting here doing our security team at church and stuff and making sure no one comes to steal the kids. And I'm like, I don't want to spoil it because it totally caught me off guard. I had no idea what it was about, really. And it's a Western, but it's a Native American confessing to a priest or a pastor. And Pat was like, okay, all right, I'll check it out. So I sent him the link and he said, listening to it now. And I'm glad you didn't read it because I hope you had the same experience I did. And I guess maybe we should be careful before we talk about any more of it, just to give people the opportunity to hop out before we get into spoilers.
Yeah, and we'll give I think we're gonna do some brief overview stuff, kind of some teasers, get you more interested if you're on the fence, and then we'll give you a clear cut, time when we're hopping off of from summarizing to synopsis to now we're going to spoiler mode, talking about all the stuff we liked and all the ins and outs and things.
Maybe here's the thing. I was really stoked on doing our thumbnail and artwork for this episode.
I'll make it I'll make it discreet.
Okay, all right, good.
I'll make it discreet, but little things where it's like,
because I feel like if I saw the thumbnail rather than the artwork for the cover of the book, I'd be like, oh, I think I know what that's about. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Anyways, Welcome, Ken, as always. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking time to hop in and listen. And of course, if you're listening to this, you know that we highly recommend The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. The Buffalo Hunter Hunter is a novel written by Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is a descendant and a Native American. He is actually out here in Boulder, Colorado. So pretty close yonder to us. And he teaches at CSU. He's got a chair at CSU.
Oh, really?
I mean, at CSU, at CU
okay.
Boulder.
Mm-hmm.
And his other popular novels that people may have heard of is called Mongrels, and The Only Good Indians, as well as My Heart is a Chainsaw. Now, again, My Heart is a Chainsaw. I remember on Reddit when I first saw someone suggesting Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and I saw they're like, I really never liked My Heart is a Chainsaw, but I love Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I was like, oh my gosh, this reads like anime. I don't think I'm going to be interested in this. This sounds so cringe. And honestly, I did look up more about Stephen Graham Jones, or as people call him, SJG. And I really think looking up who he is as an author and what he wants to tell stories about is what convinced me to actually give the book a shot.
And like knowing that he's native, like kind of changes like how you read that title, I think too. Like I feel like I can hear like a heart behind the title more so than just like being like, this wasn't mistranslated from Timu, or like or like My Heart is a Chainsaw isn't like just going to be a like a weird horror book for like middle school girls.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like you can I then see like maybe it's wrong that I'm automatically assuming because he's native he has a deeper, more like spiritual side, or like sure. You see what I'm getting at?
I get what you're saying.
I'm not trying to assume, I don't just assume that, but I do feel like native people I know do have a like.
There's more to talk about.
There's more to talk about, and
they got a lot more like that they can make a story about, because the truth is that they have a pretty tumultuous and unique identity. Right,
and and it's not like every like. I don't think every person who's out there is walking around like putting their hand in a puddle and like looking up and then saying something about like what happened.
To rain in Oregon today,
right, and like or like making like these things. But I think there is in general, like culturally, there's a different way of talking, different way of understanding, different way of that people engage language as well.
Yeah,
and the way he engages the language in Buffalo Hunter. I think we see that,
yeah,
for sure.
No, I agree. And like, I think for me, when I saw that he was when I got an idea from watching interviews with him and kind of reading a couple interviews with him, I got a better idea. And I truly do believe like there's so many people telling the same story. I there's a particular book series I really enjoy called Galaxy's Edge. And it's not Star Wars, but it's based on it's not even like loosely adapting Star Wars. It's like Star Wars, but with a way more grungy, dirty, gritty military take on it. And it's written by like former vets and stuff, and it's excellent. There's like probably like over 20 books of it now, and I've really enjoyed it. And there's hit or misses, but most of the time it's pretty good. And there's also Wayward Galaxy and something else and something else and something else, and they're all the same story. It's like as soon as like Galaxy's Edge wrote this thing that took off, which was again kind of a twist on like something else that already existed before it. Everything else started copying it, and now like the authors of Galaxy's Edge started this other series called Forgotten Ruin, which is like special forces guys in essentially Dungeons and Dragons, and it's awesome. You get to pretty much see how like a platoon of Rangers would defend Helm's Deep, and it's pretty freaking metal, and it's violent, and it's pretty cool. And then now there's like 15 different people doing this like modern day warrior trapped in primitive time or age or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all doing the same series with pretty much the same kind of spinoff. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so bottom line, what I'm saying is there's a million iterations on horror, sci-fi, and like this seems like the same thing told over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seemed when I found Stephen Graham Jones and found his work and saw what he's saying, he was telling stories that I just haven't heard yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's even like, to add on to that, I thought Buffalo Hunter was going to be the story of essentially like, you know, the Native American 1800s, early 1900s Red Dawn.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I was like, this is going to be Native American going full indigenous, as you know, again, military term there that might not be politically correct, but going native. It like just like straight up like giving it an insanely guerrilla warfare time to those who are he sees as, you know, intruding and trespassing and destroying his way of life or his tribe's way of life. And so that's not necessarily wrong.
Right. But it was,
But it was not that simple.
Yeah.
It was really sick how he took it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just expected the story as, you know, the story as told from the other side of things, you know, versus, you know, there's the Cowboys versus Indians type of, you know, thing just told from the other side, right? Sort of like, you know, engagement, but, which I was down for, excited for that too. But
that would have been a good book in of its own.
Right. Exactly. But then I was wrong. And so, yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So this book takes place in 2012. The book is, I would say, it's Stephen Graham Jones's magnum opus, is what a lot of people are saying. It's his masterpiece. But it takes place in 2012 as Arthur Bukarn begins reading the PDF transcriptions she's receiving of her great-great-great-grandfather's journal from 1912. And then we kind of get the flashback to our other narrators back in 1912, where we have Good Stab, who is a Pagani Blackfeet Indian, confessing or sharing. He says it's a confession, but it's mostly a life story. And he's sharing that with the pastor, this Lutheran pastor, Arthur Bukarn, Etsy's great-great-great-grandfather. And I got to say, before we dive into the non-spoiler summary, I just want to shout out the voice actors. Because all the voice actors I've looked up, and I thought they all did really, really, really good. There was a way, so Shane Ghostkeeper is the narrator for Good Stab. And Shane Ghostkeeper, I guess, he's a musician. He's a Native American, and he's also acted in a couple shows and things like that. But it seems mostly, excuse me, oh my gosh, yawn crept up right on me. It seems like he's mostly been doing like audible narrations as well as his own like kind of freelance musician work. But he narrates Ghost Stab in a way that just feels like I'm right there. Like when I'm walking my dog or driving my car or like taking a shower or going to bed and I'm listening to Good Stab tell a story, I forgot that I'm listening to a book. It really did feel to me like I was listening to a recording of like someone confessing something. You know, it felt very well done. And I think that's in a lot of part to Stephen Graham Jones's writing. But I thought Shane Ghostkeeper did a good thing, because even when Shane Ghostkeeper does accents or impersonations, it really sounds to me like the way you'd hear a Native American person impersonating non-Native Americans.
Right.
And it was really, really well done. And he had enough emotion in it that you still had this clear image of a very reserved, very haunted Native American man, but also like you believe the emotion is hurt or pain or sadness, or excitement. which I feel like is very hard to do to an audience, right, when they can't see, and you have to kind of be the stereotypical almost like presentation of the stoic warrior Indian.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he did a really good job. And then Marin Ireland, she's in a couple things. She's in a lot of horror movies as like a background supporting actress. I really liked her in The Empty Man. And then I think I also saw, The Dark and the Wicked. But she is Etsy. She does a good job. I think she really provides a convincing performance and attitude, especially at the points where we step out of a document, out of the book, and it's actually an audio recorder, and she's narrating to an audio recorder, and it really does sound like she's recording what she's doing in the moment. So, and that shows like her ability to do a really great like performance of fear or anxiety, rather than just like reading off of a script or a page. And then Owen Teal, most people will know him as he was Blackthorn, the Night's Watch, not commander, but one of the Night's Watch in Game of Thrones. He's the one who gave Jon Snow a hard time, calling him a bastard. The bastard Snow. But he plays Arthur Bukarn in this, and he's excellent. I think his performance is the best one. I genuinely feel the self, not deprecating, but self punishing and like hauntedness of a pastor that truly has become a man who fully and wholly believes in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, and believes in God's calling for us as, people on earth, while also like beginning to remember who he was before in that previous life, and is grievously like haunted by it. And so I think all the performances are really well done. I also think that on that note, Owen Teal also, like when he's talking about food, I genuinely see the starving, mouth-wateringly like hungry poor pastor in the middle of Montana. Like every line about food, he really makes me believe like this is a man who's honestly confessing his love for cake and eggs and sausage and jams, and is not a man reading what an author wrote. You know what I mean? Like it's just like the way they acted, it made you forget that this is a book, and it really did feel like an actual audio, like recording of like an honest acting at the time.
Oh yeah, I was totally drawn into it, and like you were saying, it was the book for me flew by listening to it, and it
you were done with it before I was.
When it was over, I was so bummed, because then I knew whatever I listened to next just was not gonna. It was just gonna be back to like Audible guy voice, versus like, and not to mention also the author plus the voice actors in here was like, it just told. I could just sit there and listen to it, and feel like I was sitting there listening to the story.
Really? Yeah.
And so I'm going to give my teaser just for this little. You've hit some of these points. So I'm going to just give, for those of you who want to get out, or if you're still on the fence, so you're going to keep listening, I'm going to give you the little non-spoiler intro summary, and so the novel's set in the American West. It spans multiple generations, and it begins at a university research center that holds a journal from 1912 that was found in the walls of a historical Lutheran church in Miles City, Montana in 2012, where Arthur Bukarn reads the transcription of the journal's chronicles. And as readers, we encounter the three individual accounts of this book. And the discovered journal gives the account of the preacher and his daily thoughts and goings on, but it also records a testimony of an old Blackfeet native man called Good Stab. And Good Stab comes to the preacher to give a, quote, confession And over the preceding months and at multiple encounters, Good Stab recounts the tales of his past, his people, his homeland. And as we're swept into this story, we learn that maybe this book isn't what we expected it to be from the title. And the author, Stephen Graham Jones, takes us into a piece of even his own people's history with a spin, and he engages and invites us to see the American West through this wider lens that doesn't shy away from violence, tragedy, heartache, and especially the loss of a place where, mighty buffalo once roamed.
Smoke break.
Smoke break.
Hey, Ken, it's Mick, and I've got something important to talk about. We all hope we never find ourselves in a self-defense situation, but life's unpredictable. Enter the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer, an actual credible law firm you can put on retainer for your self-defense needs. For just $35 a month, you get national coverage in all 50 states for criminal and civil legal representation in self-defense situations, complete with a 24/7, 365 toll-free emergency line. That's real legal support when you need it most. What's in the package? Bail bonds, scene cleanup, firearm replacement, even mental health counseling. Plus, 0 fees for a laundry list of defense-related costs like expert witnesses. So support the show and get yourself some peace of mind. Click the link in our show notes or visit our sponsors page to sign up for the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer.
Hey folks, Pat here. If you're like Mick and I, you're a fan of classic tales like Lonesome Dove, Blood Meridian, The Three-Body Problem, and Steinbeck's East of Eden. With Audible, you can dive into these epic stories anytime, anywhere. Sign up for a free month, and your first audiobook is on the house. To start your free trial and support our show, click the link in the show notes or swing by the sponsors page on our website.
Want an awesome website for your podcast? Check out Podpage. We use it for the Mick and Pat show, and it's a game changer. Set it up in minutes, no coding needed. Support the show by using our link to get started. Your podcast deserves a home as great as ours. Podpage, the one-stop solution. Yeah, honestly, if there's one thing real world that I take out of this, it's that the next time I'm going up in past the foothills here in Colorado to pass those herds, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to pull over and I'm going to watch and just like take it in, because it is crazy to me that we still have, American buffalo that are alive. Especially when you listen to this story and you're just like, holy smokes. Like, and I get it. I've heard 100 times, right, from like, different stuff in class or school, or right. But you just don't listen to it or believe it until like you can have a very sincere telling of the stories of how they tried to eradicate the buffalo in order to starve out Native Americans.
And those numbers going from estimated 30 to 60 million down to, we got all the way down to 300 in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. And it was just, I remember seeing like images of like the piles of the bones and just being like gobsmacked by that. But all that said, I like hearing it in this story, I truly do think like I'm going to stop and smell the roses and like try to appreciate that animal for what it is the next time I get to like look at them. Because also like I would say 99% of Americans have never seen a buffalo in person.
Right. Yeah.
Like a real American buffalo.
That's probably true.
And I feel like you and I probably take it for granted because twice, 3 times a year we drive by like the biggest herd in America.
Right.
So anyways, all right, that's your warning. If you're interested and you don't want the book spoiled, dip out. Come back and watch us later. That's the only thing that we really say that for. You know what I mean? Because we genuinely think these books are great and worth the experience on your own. But if you already listened to the book, excellent. Thanks for joining us here. And if you're like, spoil it for me because I can't handle scary, and I'll listen to it afterwards. Great. Happy you're here. But Pat, let's crack open our beers.
All right.
Ironically, Pat found from Anchorage Brewing Company a beer called Till Next Time, which is the sign off that Pat and occasionally me, always gives at the end of this podcast. And it looks pretty metal. It's got a witch doctor and a skeletal knight cheering beers together.
Kind of Black Plague-y.
Yeah, very, very like grim, dark, medieval Black Plague. The ingredients are water, hops, malt, and yeast. So it's probably going to be a pretty... I'm going to bet it's not going to have a citrusy. I bet it's going to be a pretty hoppy IPA.
Triple IPA.
Oh, triple. Okay, all right. 10%. Cool. Oh, brewed with Citra Incognito.
Oh.
So it probably will have some citrus.
We will see.
Anywho's, here we go. Cracking the can. I'm pretty stoked. We need a new mini fridge because I left these in the mini fridge for like 45 minutes and they're still about 60 degrees.
I like it.
Way more tame than I thought it was going to be for a triple IPA.
Me too. It was like not putting it on this level, but if I close my eyes and it was like, hey, this is a triple IPA from True. I'm not saying it's that good, but just as far as on the tame factor. And we're not doing a full brews and reviews tonight, but we'll give you the mini.
I'm not reviewing this beer at all.
Yeah, we're just giving you the mini. Do the quick, we're telling you about it. But
it's got an odd and almost at first tastes like I'm drinking like pineapple juice out of the cans,
It's like pineapple juice force from New Belgium, kind of like that.
Yeah, it is.
That's the thing that's been people have been on right now. So
the aftertaste though, maybe it's just because it's my dinner.
Yeah, no, it's that little like spicy.
It is, isn't it?
Okay, spicy on the back, yeah.
Because it tastes to me like a little bit like the sandwich I had, which had like spicy sauce.
It's like that dry chili spice.
Okay, right. So it is there.
Yeah.
I was like, I taste my jalapenos that were on my sandwich. It's like a pineapple jalapeno kind of taste.
Yeah. I like this one.
I like it too. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely caught me off guard. All right. Going into the book. Pat, as usual, introduce us to the characters.
Oh, yes.
Character corner.
Yes. So, we've gone into these, and there was a lot of characters throughout the book. I picked just 5 for us to kind of break down. There's others we might bring up and briefly talk about, but Arthur Bukarn, her character's set in modern day. She's an academic. Was she a teacher, a professor? She had the like a fellowship or something to research. Or
she is a professor.
Yeah,
but she didn't have tenure at
That's
University
of
Wyoming.
Yep, she was trying to get her tenure, and so she was on the cusp of that.
And they say you have to be published if you're going to get tenure.
Right. And so she was, and it's a big part of this story was she was kind of thinking about, this could have been her big break. This could have been her tenure. This is a story, quite the story. And so her character, I think that not a super dynamic or in-depth character. There's some depth there to her, and at the end of the story, she grows, because really we encounter her at the beginning, and then we really encounter her at the very end of the story, and she does develop, but she's the vessel for this being delivered in modern times, and for the conclusion of the story to come full circle. I thought her character was good, but I do think it was, just the, really the method to which to transport the story. And the author even said, I think in his acknowledgments, was that he originally didn't have her in the end with the final pieces and the final scenes as kind of the with her final kind of hero scenes.
He said something along the lines of like, Etsy, where did you come from? In his acknowledgments at the end of the book, because he just didn't foresee that being the package.
And I think he had her kind of at the beginning as just thing, but then like, oh, this, it's for the final conclusion there. But her character is key, but for me, I just took her as a that vessel and help for conclusion. And then we've got Arthur Bukarn, and he's German, right? You're like, is German French French German.
It's like, yeah, the last name is French, but German ancestry.
Yep. And he's American, and he's referred to in the book by Goodstab as three persons. And he eventually kind of starts to refer to himself as three persons at times.
Well, I mean, all of his chapters, he self-references, probably backdated.
Right.
As the absolution of three persons.
Right. And and I was wondering, is that just a straight reference to the Trinity? Or is that into the three people he was in this story?
I think it's both. Because Goodstab also was three people.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And as Arthur went through his phases, he was three different people throughout the book. And the person we encounter the most is the Lutheran preacher in Montana in 1912. We learned that he was a former soldier, and eventually he turns into a groundhog.
He turns it. There's this.
So for those of you who haven't read this, now if we spoiled that for you, you might just be like, "What are you talking about?"
Hold on. So there's an old school horror movie I was looking for just now. It's not old school. It's like early 2000s, late 90s maybe. And it was made for like TV, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
But it's about this giant mole rat in this town. And this guy goes around America killing these giant mole rats.
Huh. And so, yeah, for those of you listening who haven't read it, but you're wondering what the heck's going on. There's some pieces to this story that it goes supernatural on us, and it goes while it engages kind of native religion and history and supernatural stuff or myth. It also then just goes into some deeply seated European myths, like some Transylvanian type myths, and so Arthur's development. Arthur, it's interesting to watch him develop throughout the story, because he goes from when we meet him, he's just this kind of peaceful preacher man, but he develops in this backwards way as we learn who he was, and we kind of come to see why he's been titling his journal entries as the absolution of three persons. And because he does carry this weight, or why does he love food so much? Maybe it's because of a time when he was starving and he made the worst decision of his whole life because he was hungry and cold, and then all the way into his final form of this kind of, as someone who was maybe seeking a penance via being a preacher, eventually finds his final penance on earth as being a lowly creature that's belly crawls across the ground, and so he has his three persons that he is throughout this book. Did you find the naked mole rat movie?
No, I'm still looking for it.
Oh man.
But don't worry about it. I'll keep on looking.
Excuse me. And so next, character-wise, we have Goodstab. He's already been mentioned a few times. His given name at birth was Weasel Plume, and then it was changed to Goodstab after, when he was about 12 years old, he was in a hunting party, and the older men went out to hunt, and they had captured a soldier, and the soldier was tied up. But 12-year-olds kind of let their guard down sometimes, and the soldier got him from behind, and as the soldier was choking him out, he grabbed a weapon. He grabbed an arrow that he had placed in the ground, and he swung it behind him, and he drove it through the man's eye and killed him. And so his dad gave him a new name that day, which was Goodstab, and he kind of earned his stripes that day as a man, and that was now his name. His name later on becomes Takes No Scalps. we'll get into probably more of like why his name is that and what happened, and in the story why he became Takes No Scalps. When he would kill people, he would take other things from them, and he was born. The story in the journal said in 1912, but he was born around 1820. So by the time he's encountering the preacher, he's about 90 years old.
But he doesn't look a day over 40.
He doesn't look that old. And so which is maybe a little more telling of, as what this story moved into and what it became. And Good Stab, I think definitely my favorite character of the book. Good Stab is I think the main character, for sure. And it's interesting because usually this type of character you're not rooting for. And
you can spoil it, man. You're the character introductory.
I know, but I just want to we'll get to it on the next character.
Okay, the full blood.
Yeah.
The Catman.
Yeah, it's the Catman. So, but with his transformation through his different names, and as he becomes this, it's interesting to watch and root for. I think his character was done really well, written well, and I didn't necessarily think he was a good man or a bad man. He had good attributes and bad attributes, just as Arthur Bukarn had. He was a good man and he was a bad man, and I think that the author really pulls and ties the tension there well between, in some ways, like there are moral, there's absolute, moral things, and not relative morality, but there are areas where a man can be many different things and can engage in many different things. And so then we have the Catman. The Catman shows up in the beginning of the story with when Good Stab and his band is out going around they're trying to cover up a war party or kind of an attack.
First they're hunting.
Right, they were hunting at first, but then they're also, part of their job was to also, as they're out and about hunting, their job's also to kind of cover up if and when soldiers or settlers are killed. And because the group he was a part of, Good Stab was a part of, was men without families who were going out doing this because he had lost his Good Stab.
His wife and
kid were killed.
Kids were already dead, yeah.
By, I think, a rival tribe
killed them, yeah.
But then they find this man in a cage who looks like a cat. And the Catman, I think that I kind of wish there was more of the Catman. In some ways.
Okay, it's interesting you say that because I felt that way too until he came back, and then I was like, oh, sick. I'm getting more of the Catman. And then you get even more of him, and like you realize the Catman, no matter how villainous other characters are, the Catman is like beyond villainous. The Catman is like a bored Satan.
Yeah, he
wants to be entertained.
He is what this character always is.
Yeah.
The what for do I need you.
That was pretty good.
And he talks about his accent.
If people saw that movie, they would know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so the Catman, we learn, is I would
say it's Dracula.
I know. I was going to wait to say the word or not. I didn't want to say the word till now or later, just because they only say the word once in the whole book.
Do they say vampire?
Just once.
Really?
At the very end. It says vampire at the very end.
Who?
She does.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I was surprised. I thought they were never going to say it, and then he did. I wonder if he shouldn't have said it. But the Catman, we learn, is a vampire. And it's 450-year-old vampire. Yeah, I think it is. Basically, you would assume he is the original.
Yeah.
In the way he talks about it, right?
Yeah, and he's definitely. They did such a good job because even when he's first described, you're like, what? What is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, for me, when they're talking about, you know, the
Because when did you learn?
scenario around, dude, the moment they were like, Cross is hanging on his cage, I was like,
Oh, that's when you knew it was a vampire?
oh my God, what?
Mhm.
And
I didn't know it was a vampire until at the end of that battle when
Goodstab became a vampire.
When he fell on Goodstab and was drinking him, or his blood was going into him.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, he's a vampire.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm like, well, you're like an hour into the book or whatever at this point, or hour and a half into the book. And now you're like, oh, this is taking a turn now. This is not what I thought.
Anyways, I really like the Catman because when it's presented, it's not overtly obvious. You know, Goodstab doesn't say like, and it was what you Germans would call a vampire. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He describes him with features he can most closely compare them to. Mm-hmm. And that is even a part later on, which is cool. And we'll talk about it later. But it's a part that makes Arthur Bukarn not believe him. Mm-hmm. Arthur's like, please, Goodstab, I know that Native Americans have no idea what a house feline is. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't describe a man with feline teeth as a cat man. Right. You know, why not describe him as a big mouth man like you do? And like, that's what you call the mountain lion. Mm-hmm. And so it was just one of those things where I found that was like, wow, the dichotomy of like how I convey and describe this thing based on my own people's language and understanding without those myths. Mm-hmm. And then also like how that works against you rather than just being like, you know, Dracula.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And just he let it unfold for us so well that way. And that's why it was so fun to have it read that way. And I think speaking of that too is a good part to just break and talk real quick about the language the author used and how he taught us a language throughout the book in his own way. No, we can't speak, you know, the words that were said, but there's lots of native words, or the way the people would have said, you know, instead of, you know, one of the big example would be like, instead of buffalo, they called them blackhorns. Right. And what I think was interesting was we learned this language, and there's a part later on in the book where Goodstab he's learning to speak English, and from somebody from Napi, and Napi is this
like kind of Loki,
kind of mythical
trickster Native American god,
probably like a, you know, I don't know if they have tiers, but it's like, you know, like a tier 2 god type, kind of like the,
not Odin, but Loki.
Right. And so Goodstab says, you know, he would be saying these words, he would be speaking, and then he would say it again, but with the English word for it, and then he would say it again, and then he'd stop and go back and forth and say it this way and that way, and that's how I learned this language. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the author knew, as he put that in, that he had also, at this point in the book, he had taught us a language where I'd written down kind of some of these words because I just liked them, you know, were just like because when I read the first chapter, I was so lost on what is he talking about, you know, like the Pagani, like, and I was kind of like, okay, that's
the
like,
Nakiba,
that's
wait, how do I say it?
The Napiqua.
Napiqua.
It's the Napiqua came, and I'm like, oh, the Napiqua. I'm like,
is that another
what
tribe?
Is that?
Yeah.
This bad tribe? Like the Napiqua is the white men, and the Pagani is the natives. You know, the Blackhorns, the
small robes. Pagani are small robes.
That was their clan. The Pagani, small robes was their like sub clan family.
Oh, I think Pagani is the actual small robes, like Blackfeet are separate than Pagani. It's Blackfeet's overarching, but Pagani's the small robe clan.
It's the small robe clan.
I think so. Because I looked it up, and I think Pagani is the self name for the pagan Blackfeet. Because there's like 3 Blackfeet tribes, and the pagan Blackfeet are like most closely associated with the Pagani. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll say this. The massacre that occurs in the book to Goodstab's tribe is based off of the pagan, which is not the Anglo-pagan term.
Right.
But it's like the tribe name for the sub-tribe in the Blackfeet, pagan.
Okay. Makes sense. And then, you know, these words like prairie runner. I was like, what's that? And then it's like, as I explained, that's an antelope, obviously. You know, the long legs, the elk, and the backbone, the mountain range, and the sand hills is paradise. The mini shots gun, you know, and the grease shooter, you know, and the real meat.
Would you think the big mouths and hungry mouths were in sticky mouths?
And the little big mouths.
The little big mouths.
I think those are coyotes.
Coyotes,
wolves.
big mouths are wolves. Sticky mouths, I think, are wolverines because they used to be native up into Montana. And then I think the hungry mouths or whatever are mountain lions.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, and then so they had all these names, and then what was the one for the rabbit?
What was it? Tall ears? Not tall ears.
Tall ears was like a wags its tail was a deer.
No, wags its tail I think is goat.
A goat?
Oh, and you know what? It is a deer. Because the little white tail. That's why I thought it was a goat. I was like, what has a little white tail?
Yeah.
No, you're right. Wags its tail is a deer. Tall ears are donkeys or mules.
Or mules, yeah.
Fast runner.
Fast runner is a rabbit,
rabbit,
you know?
which is like a personal thing for Good Stab. You know, he believed his fast runner guided him.
And so there's all these little words like this in the book, right? And at the first time you're listening to the chapter, you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on. And then by the end, I knew it. I knew it all. I saw it all. I knew what they were. I knew what those words meant. They were hitting me and hitting me even, and like I felt connected to it, you know. And so I thought that was a really cool way to pull this language together.
100% agree with you.
You know, and so then, you know, for my final character that I was going to mention, was a Blackhorn himself named Weasel Plume, and he was it a he or she? It was a he, yeah.
Was a he,
and he was a white buffalo, named Weasel Plume, which was Good Stab's original
name as a child.
And so, I think we'll talk about Weasel Plume later too, and how that developed. But those are kind of the main characters and the things, and that got to me a little. You know, I was like, man, son of a. I had to go back and listen. I was like, oh my god, what just happened? You know.
Yeah.
So
I think the thing that was interesting to me was, so much of the dichotomy between as well, like with those animals and like what was clearly not the native animals. Like horses don't have a name; they're horses, but that's because they were brought over, and the name that the Native Americans have for them is the name that was given to them.
They do have white horns.
Well, white horns, they do call
for cattle.
But I don't know if white horns were brought over too, or if there were also cows.
They were brought over.
They were. Okay. I didn't know if there was cows in existence on the Newfoundland.
I wondered if I was wondering if he just didn't have a different name for a horse out the gate just for clarity or not, because I just listened to that first chapter again to like kind of recenter, but I was wondering about that too, because there are other animals too where they just refer to them as what they are, then they have their little names or not. So
yeah, no, it was super good. And I also really found totally enraptured in that language, and I think it's because right after like each of those chapters where we learn more and more of the history and cultural words and their significance to Good Stab. In his confessions, we get Arthur Bukarn's reflection on those words and his analyzing. And honestly, he even says, like, I find myself using these words and writing about the black horns rather than the buffalo, and writing about the white horns and their milk rather than longhorn cows, right? And like, it's just one of those things where you see it, what's happening in your own mind and your own subconscious happening to a character in the book, and it's very reinforcing. Anyways,
and we're like in the European thing is the binomial Latin. You know, we're just categorizing. It doesn't matter. Just stick it in this category. Right. And then for the natives, it was names matter. Just
Yeah.
like the fact that your name changed throughout your life.
Mm-hmm.
Names really mattered. And so it's like just pulling that string through there.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, you're right. You're right. All right. Hopping into the key points and themes here, right? I think the key themes, I got 5 key themes that I think are, emphasized throughout the novel, right? And then we'll hop into key points, because I want to spend more time on the key points of the novel rather than like the themes. The first theme is the easiest one, I think, to skim off the surface, and you could probably pull it off of just understanding the concept of the book. It's like, this is going to talk about the rise and fall of people, the rise and fall of nations, and how a rising nation is growing because it's watered with the blood of the previous one, and a falling nation is falling because it's being drowned in its own blood. And this book certainly is about that. Like, this is a lot of people I saw say that this is America's story, and I don't think I entirely agree with that.
Right.
Because I think there's so many facets of America, and that there's a lot of different places and times where the story of America was different in its own not great way. But I can't say like that this itself is the story of America. This is certainly a story that could be told in many different places at a certain time in America, right? And I think it's a very key part of America's history. But all that said, I do think this is more of a window into how the like great expansive what was the term, manifest destiny was designed to drown the like people nations in their own blood or in the blood of like their culture, right? It's like, you know what, they just keep on eating this buffalo. Let's just kill all the buffalo. Yeah. And let's poison it. So that way they can't even eat it and nothing can eat it. And they just have to sit out there and rot. And there's nothing they can do with it. It was pretty crazy to see that demonstrated. And it's, again, like, this is not going deep. I'm not going deep on this. If people who are like, oh my gosh, if they're rolling their eyes because they're like, I've heard this a million times in a million different stories. You have, right? But I personally think this one was far more well written because it felt very personal. And I say that as it felt personal because the character of a Christian pastor was very believable to me. There was not a single misstep in Arthur Bukarn's interpretation of his faith or interpretation of God's will in my eyes. I can't remember one time where Arthur even blamed God for anything. Like, Arthur never even blamed God when the church was full of the corpses of people in town.
Or like, and every horror movie has a priest, right?
A priest in a crisis of faith. It's always a crisis of faith.
And the priest is always like a trash.
Yeah, he's always shitty.
Always, right, this like this underlying stuff. And while Arthur has a past, of being a part of a massacre, he's not. Yeah, the author didn't use him as like that standard trope.
Yeah. And that's why it's so good, especially as someone who is I would say a very strong believer, a very strong non-denominational, right? I'm not Catholic. And so like I read this and I'm like, dude, my man, like Arthur, I empathize with you. I empathize with your own reflection on your sin. And I also empathize with your view of God and how you see, like, especially this, like there's never a moment where Arthur judges another man or woman. Like and like we're getting the inner workings of Arthur's mind. There's never a moment where he's like that dirty whore or that festering drunk or this wicked, dirty Indian. Like all of his characterizations of people of like, these are God's children. And even though my heart is weak, and by weak, he means like tired and just wants to rest or just wants to eat a sandwich. He's like, the least I can do is listen to them.
And there's even a scene in the book where he's stumbling drunk through the pews,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, but like that didn't feel disingenuous to, like, I feel like with so many shows, movies, books that just want to totally crap on the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was respectful of it, and which I appreciate, as well as like, and I'm okay with engaging the humanity of a preacher and his shortcomings, but and then the way it was done, it felt authentic to 100%. The way that a human would be who's walking out their faith that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess all that said, when I see that side and how well that is written, and I also see the other side of this, that is like the confession and retelling of a people's history and what occurred to them and being a witness to it. It has more validity. It has more worth, because I can sit there and be like, you know what? They're not cheapening, like the author, the writer is not cheapening and like shitting on my empathy, like what I can empathize with, what I can like relate to and understand in my own real like day in life. He's being very honest with it. And it feels like he's making a very great effort, even if he's not a believer, which I have no idea, right? But if he's not a believer, he's made great efforts to know what a believer believes and their view, even in the midst of like fear or guilt, whatever. And so I have a huge respect for him in that way, which makes me very much trust everything he's saying on the other side, right? And so hearing this story from Good Stab and the downfall of the Blackfeet Nation and other Native American tribes and just what was done to them, never felt like I was getting reamed over the head with like, you bad white person, don't you feel bad for what your ancestors did? If anything, it felt like, be Arthur. The least you can do right now that God asks of you is to sit in this pew and listen. And honestly, I think that's why I was so receptive to it. And that's why I also say like it's about the rise and fall of nations. It's not about you should feel bad for what America did. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we should ask SGJ and ask him to be like, hey man, did you want us to like feel bad, or were you just like wanting us to shut up and listen?
Like see it for what it was.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I never once felt bad. I never felt like, ooh, Mick should feel guilty for this, and Pat should feel bad for this, so I'm going to tell Pat to listen to this. You know, right? I was like, this is important. This feels like a very authentic, honest telling of this, and I feel like I'm learning a lot in, you know, the wrapping of it being partly a supernatural story,
right?
And I really feel like I took a lot away and learned a lot, and I've been reflecting on a lot of it outside of its supernatural wrapping, right?
Because he took the platform of a vampire story, you know, as kind of the foundation in a sense, or the stage was a vampire story, and then building upon that, he was able to tell greater, bigger stories, which also, if you actually go back in time and maybe look at even like vampire stories, would be like, why were they telling a story about that? You like around like plague or issues, or like, you know, or like any old stories,
heaven, hell, religion.
Things that actually like engage deeper thought, right? It's not just about like bloody, gory violence, all these things. And as it has become that in many ways. And like this story is very violent, bloody, gory, but I didn't, to the violence, blood, and gore aspect of this thing, there was never a scene where I was like, put off by the violence. It just felt...
The only time I was put off was definitely when he was describing when Good Stab was recounting the time
ice chamber.
Not the ice chamber. The time when he killed like over 25 fur trappers in one night.
Oh yeah.
And when he went to go do it, the first thing he caught them doing was raping one of their young skin boys.
Yeah.
And it was just like one of those things I was like, holy shit, like this is fucking dark.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. And
I get why he's killing all of them.
Right.
I'd kill them all too.
I wasn't desensitized to it, but even in that scene, I wasn't like, this is just over the top for no reason.
No, I didn't feel that way
like,
either. But it was pretty. That was easily the hardest part for me to like listen to.
For sure, yeah. And so it engaged the violence and darkness and evil, but yeah, how so many horror movies are just like, well, that was just uncalled for. This
Sure.
was everything in this was called for, I think, to a point, you know.
Dude, on that note too, do you have a favorite kill? Because I definitely have one or two. I think in the tent there's a moment where he talks about how he puts his he swings his hand down with such force at the top of a dude's head that he breaks his wrist and forearm.
Oh yeah,
but he breaks the man's skull in half from like top of the skull down to the belly.
Yeah,
it like literally flays the guy open to the point where he can see the man behind him.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that is awesome. The fact that the reason it was so cool to me because I was like, he talked about how his arm was literally broken though from it in tattered ruins, which is just something that you don't get. Like you see like the over the top super strong vampire that can just like chop people in half without breaking a sweat. And it's like no. It's just that he doesn't. He can push his body further. It's still gonna break, but he can push it further because that pain tolerance is so much higher.
Yeah.
I just remember that one being so visceral. I was like, holy smoly, dude. That was insane.
And it wasn't a kill, but it was an image I saw, like, because I did, the whole time I was listening to this, I was like, God, this would be a way better movie than Nosferatu, except it'd be impossible to make.
You know what I was thinking?
Huh.
I was not thinking it was a better movie than Nosferatu. I thought it was going to be a better show than fourth season of True Detective.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's definitely that. But, like, you know, yeah, I was thinking the whole time. I was thinking like, man, this would be a sweet movie. It would be so hard with all books, you know. It's hard to capture it. But the scene I saw, I was like, this would be like in the trailer. Was he's swinging Weasel Plume's skull.
Oh yeah,
back behind him as a war club. So like, you know, picture a dude, you know, and I could picture it's an upward shot angle, you know, of a guy in a full C, hands and arms back. With a buffalo skull bringing it down, like, and he missed the shot, but like that was like, I feel like that would be like just the hero shot trailer picture of just like that was for me that was one of the most like
it's pretty metal
intense scene. Yeah, exactly.
It felt pretty like one thing that SGJ does really good in this is that he brings the like black metal Viking violence and like that vampiric depiction really closer home to like, okay, but also like now it's Native American, right? It's flavored as Native American violence, right? And it's just so metal at points. Like it's epic. All right, sorry. That's the first theme. Second theme, penance. What is penance? We hear the word a lot. A lot of people know what this, they know the word, right, in a context. But like taken out of a purely religious context or biblical context, penance is the confession of sin to a priest or person and reception of absolution. It is saying, I have sinned, here is the sin, and I give you the right to judge me. And I'm going to go through these next three together, because I think they all kind of course play onto each other. But absolution is the third theme. Absolution, again, we hear it a lot. What's it mean? The formal release from guilt, obligation, or punishment. So you receive absolution during penance.
You give penance, you receive absolution.
Yes,
right.
And then you receive absolution, but then in that absolution might not be received at the same time, which is one thing that we see through this, right? And so who really gives absolution? What does absolution look like? And then finally, gospel. Gospel, which is outside of, again, the gospels of Jesus Christ, but just looking at gospel as like the noun of it now, not proper noun, a set of principles, beliefs, or absolute truths. So I think those three will go over together as like kind of one in the other, because I think they're super highly related, which is going to get us into our key points. But then finally, the last one, lineage of a people, right? How are we remembered? How do we remember the Romans? How do we remember the Ming Dynasty? How do we remember, Blackfeet tribes, right? And so all that said, I think the last one, of course, is the one that is possibly most tragic because of something you mentioned, Pat, when we were offline, but I want to emphasize it here, and then we can go to the core three: penance, absolution, and gospel, when we're going through key points. But lineage of people, Good Stab, we find out he's been feeding on Napiquans,
the whiteys,
for a few years, because he's also punishing them. He's trying to thwart their attempts to eliminate his people.
And the Blackhorn.
And the black, which is, their attempt in eliminating the Blackhorn. But he finds out that the more Napiquan blood he drinks, and how his body uses the blood to heal itself, he has begun to grow a beard. His skin's whiter, and he realizes, oh my gosh, if I drink this, I will become one of them. Which means the inverse is, if he wishes to remain Pagani and hold on to that, he must drink Pagani, which means he has to be a killer of his own people, because his body doesn't do anything with cold blood. The blood has to be from something living. And I found that so tragic, but also very interesting, because I think that is very true to today. I can't speak to that necessarily in a Native American context. I mean, I know I'm part Native American, but I've never had an opportunity or anything to like embrace that side of my family or follow up in it. I just know that's ancestry wise, right up in there. But what I can see is like, I would be more comfortable saying, like, if I were to truly try to grab a hold of my Germanic or Irish roots or Scottish roots, that to grab a hold of those and hold on to them today in an attempt to like kind of pearl clutch, right? And almost nostalgia, right? That there would be something cheapening about doing that today versus then. Right? Like there's a reason, like there are certain things that, older Germanic tribes or Scottish clans did, and their naming, even the name, the naming of like the O'Donnells or the McCarthys, right? Like all of that is got very strong roots in why it was done that way. And the roots aren't in Latin, they're in the native language, right? But I do feel like to grab a hold of those now means that you're kind of cheapening what it was then, because it was easier then. And you're kind of feeding off of it when you're like holding on to it today. And I almost like even can break it down more. Like imagine the toys you had as a kid, the TV shows, the radio channels, and radio shows, or I think the books you read and the games you played. And for me, games is a big one. If I will play like video games nowadays. I'm right now playing Command and Conquer 3 Tiberium Wars. And real G's are going to recognize that game for the freaking goat it is. It was like a lot of people's first time playing a game where you built a base and moved an army around and destroyed other people's bases. But anyways, I'm playing that purely for the nostalgia. It's a good game, but I'm playing it because in the moment, and I'm hearing the music, and I'm hearing the like dialogue in the game, and I'm back to living in like a more southern central part of Colorado. I'm at my grandparents' house on the weekend, and I'm playing on this computer, playing the game while looking out the window and seeing my neighborhood buddy walk over so we can, shoot my Red Ryder BB gun at Pepsi cans. And like there's a cheapening of that when you only get a part of it today. And I feel like I'm feeding, I'm holding on to it when I'm playing this thing. And I know it's not as good as it ever was then, but it's still pretty good right now. And it's better than the alternative, because the alternative is the Napiquan blood. And it's nasty, and I don't want a part of it. And so I again, I'm not sure that's what the author is saying. I do think that is a theme, though, heavily throughout this book. And we see it as a theme, not just for Goodstab, but also the Catman. The Catman has, I believe, a distaste and an impatience for the Native American culture. And he clearly has a pride of the heyday. You know, when he is writing Goodstab after punishing him, saying, you know, and I think Shane Ghostkeeper does it really well in the moment. He's like, you know nothing of who I am. I am 450 years old. And like that line alone delivered in Pagunny to Goodstab because this vampire, this Catman, has been among his people so long now that he knows the language. To me, felt like he's just like telling him like, this is entertainment for me.
This is another Tuesday for me. This is another game.
And he says literally like, he's like, I've been a part of the like erasing cities and the downfall of nations. Like, this is nothing. And, you know, and it made me feel like even for him, though, what he's doing as like this chief of this tribe is him probably trying to relive or hold on to something of the past. So then finally we see that also with Arthur. Arthur holds on to certain things, like a letter he was going to mail but never did, and he was going to burn but it never burned. There's the hairs, the orange-haired cat that reminds him of his orange-haired lover, who ended up being the mistress mother of his children that he had no idea of. Like all that I think is, you know, an emphasis on like how will you be remembered? You know, what is your lineage? What is your, and I mean, ultimately Etsy's story, she is the lineage, and she's shown like what her ancestry is. And then she, like, Goodstab completely gives her the choice of saying like, hey, this is, I'm not deciding what the fate is here. It's entirely in your hands. So, also the movie, it's called The Dark. It's a Canadian movie. It's about a giant mole rat eating corpses in a graveyard.
Oh my goodness.
And some cops and a scientist try to kill it. It's awful.
Sounds nostalgic.
No, it's literally just a guy in a giant mole rat costume.
Yeah.
But that's exactly, that creature is what I imagined Arthur Bukarn was in the end.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go back to the other themes, lineage of people, you got anything on that, Pat?
Yeah, no, I do. I feel like, yeah, you said it where for Goodstab, the only way to keep at the point where he is the oldest person in his tribe. No one's older than him. At the time of him even meeting Arthur, he's 90, right? And so really at this point in time, all the history, all the lineage, all the stories, he holds them all. And the only way to like keep being who he wants to be is to continue to watch the kind of downfall of his people, and you know, in a way. And so I think there's a piece there, just like to you're speaking of, where the catch-22 of in order to maintain, you have to erase pieces of it as well, and that's part of his pain that he goes through. And so yeah, I think that was where, once again, the platform of a vampire story, the sucking the blood out of something, you know, is then brought much bigger to a point of, you know, the sucking the blood out of this people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, penance, absolution, and gospel. So I'm also going to let you speak on these, Pat. Just kind of give me your thoughts on it. I mean, because we're both, you know, I would say rather religious men. And so with that, you know, how do you see, you know, these three kind of play and hold here? Because I think it's very important in the language of, you know, Arthur Bukarn refers to his own chapters where he's recounting in his journal, his own thoughts and investigations as the absolution of three persons. But then whenever we're getting Good Stab's confession, he says the gospel of the Naxara.
Yeah, the
It's hard to Naxara. Yeah, it's hard for me to pronounce it. But he refers to that as absolute truth, the gospel, and he refers to himself the absolution. You know, as in like he is being punished and will need like this is a punishment in process that will need a release from.
Yeah, and you can't. One piece on that where we're talking about penance. Penance is something you can do. Absolution you can't do. You can give it to somebody for them wronging you. So he's in a Arthur in his cannot absolve himself.
Yeah.
Right. But he is attempting to through his writings. Right. And so I think all three characters go through penance, absolution, and gospel.
Yeah.
And for Arthur, it's I think even for Arthur, it's his penance was even becoming a priest.
Oh yeah.
Or becoming a preacher in the first place. That's his act of penance, and then all the way to him. We don't know how he got, turned into a vampire himself. We know that Good Stab did it, but we didn't get the account of it.
Yeah.
We don't know if
Good Stab took him and made him drink Good Stab's blood.
Right, but we don't know. Did he willingly go do it?
Yeah.
Did he? Right. So was that chosen penance, or was that? But that's a part of his penance too, to be a gopher in the ground, whether he chose it or not. Right. And his
well, hold on. Let me say that too before we get too far.
Yeah.
We keep on referring to him as a gopher.
Right.
There's a thing here, right, where
or prairie dog.
A prairie dog, right? It's also like if Good Stab was only to feed on certain animals, or the Catman was only to feed on certain animals, that you take on more features of that animal. So the reason we say gopher is because at the end of the book, Arthur Bukarn is like a 7-foot-long groundhog, like Groundhog Man thing.
Right. They've just been out there
ugly
in the prairie. He's been also time wise.
He's for 100 years.
Good Stab has been force feeding him, as far as we can tell, prairie dogs for 100 years, for a century. And he's completely and wholly become that thing. And so that's a part of his absolution and penance. His ultimate absolution is his final, moments.
As in?
When his absolution is being, dispatched by his own family.
By his own great granddaughter.
Right.
I agree. I think that was the big thing. Was like, at first I was like, I don't think
should that chapter have been titled "The Absolution of Three Persons"?
It should have if Etsy was aware enough. I don't think Etsy was aware enough. I don't think Etsy saw what she was doing as absolution of Arthur. I think she saw it as penance for herself to Good Stab. I think she was so wrapped up I need to do something because clearly I owe Good Stab something. So I'll kill my great grandfather at on a special day in memoriam of the massacre. And I think that is also why at the end of it, Good Stab doesn't return her hello, allies, fist in the air, because he's like, that was up to you, man. Whatever happened over there, that's between you guys. I don't think Good Stab was because Good Stab never gave her any direction on what to do.
Right.
He just said a family reunion and then left.
Yep.
And that was the last word he ever said, was a family reunion. And so I do agree with you full-heartedly, what Etsy does at the end and quote unquote kills Arthur, because he's definitely not dead. He's beheaded, and his body's at the bottom of a ravine in the dead of winter. But we know from what the Catman said, beheading isn't the end at all. And so I think there's a really good chance that Arthur Bukarn, unfortunately, is going to be at the bottom of that gorge for a little while and then have to start feeding on something else.
Right.
But it is ironic that she seemed to be unaware of the penance, of the absolution she was giving, and that saw it as penance for herself.
Yeah, that was her penance for absolution, and Goodstab himself, he comes to Arthur in the first place and says to give his confession. Now, in his kind of shadowy way of saying it to Arthur, we even get a feeling like eventually, wait, whose confession is this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But
he does ultimately confess.
But it is his confession as well. It's for both of them. He's forcing Arthur to confess to what he did. But he also is giving his own confessions where he, the things he had to do to maybe ultimately save his people or get rid of the Catman. And so I don't think he ever gets absolution. He's never absolved. There's no one to absolve him.
I think his absolution is that he's not alone. He's in daylight riding horses in memoriam to this site.
Yeah.
And there's people with him.
That's a good point.
I think his absolution is that he's been living with his tribe for the last however many years. Hopefully close to 100.
Right.
I think his penance was... And I say penance because it's hard for me to think that Goodstab, the most evil thing Goodstab did in my eyes was just start killing people that had nothing to do with the massacre. I understand why he ended up going after Arthur's heirs and then, made that a thing to harass Arthur with. But dude, when we get the image of the pews full of the dead dogs and the other dead townspeople from the bar and stuff, I'm just like, dude, this is evil. This is insanely evil. This is beyond vengeance. There's no part of this that is vengeance. Because I don't even remember a evil characterization of the sheriff.
Right.
The sheriff was just a dude. He's
dude kind of doing his job, kind of.
Yeah. It was just kind of shocking to me. Because that was the time when I was I remember I was telling Billie Jean about this book the whole time through. And she was like, Goodstab's evil. Goodstab is a bad guy. And I was like, I know, but I'm shocked because I didn't think he was. And this is such an evil thing to do. So I guess with that, I do think his penance is sitting in... I think his penance is partly being a survivor and having to watch his people fade away. And also having to, in order to remain a part of his people, he has to feed on them somehow.
Right. And because his whole thing was why did Beaver Chief is punishing me for these things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then and then him having to be where he was I'm the only one who kind of knows the stories or these things. And so being alone, not being able to be with his people unless he's eaten them.
Yeah.
Right?
For probably over 100 years. Right. I do also think that him just being in the church though, to provide the confession is partly penance. We know this vampire story, right? Vampires can go on religious hallowed ground. Vampires can touch crucifixes. They can be in the sunlight and they won't turn to ash. We know that it's very uncomfortable for them. They're not smoking, but we know that he said that he burns a lot easier. He sunburns a lot easier. And the sun could eventually dry him out.
Right.
If he's just left in the sun and unable to move anything, he'd just be a dried, wrinkled, he wouldn't be dead. He'd still be able to feed if something came near, but he'd be pretty malnourished. But he talks about just being in the church and how even with all the shutters closed, it's still too bright and it hurts his eyes. And how it's exhausting for him to be there. And part of me wonders if that is a sign of something religious,
right,
has power on that supernatural blood, right? Because he even talked about how at one time or another, the Native American religious sites had, differing effects on him, right? Like whether it was like it kind of like he didn't need to feed as much, right? Like when he's with Napi, he pretty much just hibernates the whole winter.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's pretty easy living with Napi.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
No, yeah, and I think maybe the ultimate penance for him was to never be what's the forgetting the Indian the word, the P word, the Pagani, to never be Pagani again.
Never be entirely.
He can never be Pagani all the way. He just isn't. He can't, like how he speaks, one of the biggest things that got to him was he couldn't ride a horse anymore.
Yeah.
Like I can't ride a horse.
Which he learns
how to, right?
In the most awful way. He learns it from the Catman.
Right.
Like the Catman is the one who rubs his face in it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But like it's just like no matter what he does, he can never ever be Pagani, and he can't. No matter, even if he drinks them all, he's still not going to be Pagani.
Not forever.
Yep, and not all the way.
And I think it's too like just existence is penance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he talks so many times about wanting to follow the dead into the sandhills.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they'll take me to the sandhills. Maybe they'll lead me to them if I'll follow them this time.
Mm-hmm.
And like never once do spirits lead him to the sandhills because of course he can't die.
Right.
Which is crazy because you'd think like at this point, like especially, good Lord, Etsy, you'd think Etsy would know. Oh yeah, I watched Buffy the Vampire Hunter growing up, so I got to get some stakes, and I'll just stake my grandfather in the heart.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that never ever happens. His heart is never pierced with anything.
Mm-hmm.
He specifies several times getting shot in the shoulders, stabbed in the stomach, or gored even.
Mm-hmm.
Never is his heart ever pierced, which I really do think is because he's like the author, Stephen Graham Jones, is honoring that vampiric lore of like, stake to the heart would have done it, but no one ever staked these guys in the heart. Also, here's a cool thing that I think really makes a lot of sense. I kind of want to give him props. I want to send him an email or something, right? Just be like, hey, dude, I just want to say I noticed this. This seems like it was thought out.
Mm-hmm.
The first telling of Dracula, which is really known as the most modern vampire story, right? Like it brought vampires to like a world-renowned level of publicity. Was 1897 was when it was published as like a play.
Right.
And so it wouldn't have been until probably sometime after the early 1900s, right? That the play was in America or the book was in America, right? So there's a good chance, like, even Arthur Bukarn hasn't heard of what Dracula is or knows how to deal with it. No one does. No one knows what to do with these things. And Dracula, of course, the story says Vlad the Impaler became Dracula through something supernatural made Vlad the Impaler an unkillable, undying creature demon. Vlad the Impaler was truly a governor of Transylvania area in the 15th century. 15th century being 1400s. So the Catman in 1890 something is yelling in our boy Goodstab's face saying, I'm 450 years old. It kind of lines up that the Catman was Dracula, Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
And he's now just a fish out there.
Yeah.
Because for people who haven't read the book or anything, no. In the final fight, Goodstab ends up overpowering the Catman and then makes him feed on fish for years until he just lets him loose as like a giant pike. He's like, and everything he ever feasts on and drinks will always be fish. So he'll only ever be a fish again.
Yeah.
And the only way he won't be a fish is if someone pulls him out of the water, but then he'll suffocate for years on land suffering.
That is like the native wooden stake.
It is.
I feel like the way he thought it through.
Or being a
like,
groundhog.
Right, just being like, well, yeah, once he's in the lake, this sturgeon can only freaking, fish.
it's a Ouroboros, eating its own tail kind of thing. Yeah. So all that said, I just thought that was really cool. I think you touched on everything that I have for penance, absolution, and gospel. I really do believe that everyone's gospel is good stabs. Like Arthur and Etsy's gospel, their principles, beliefs, absolute truths, by the end of the book are entirely good stabs gospel, which is kind of cool because you think about it of like they are essentially the gospel of Arthur and the gospel of Etsy, saying like I've seen it, I believe. So it's kind of like the equivalent of like a gospel of Luke, gospel of John, and the gospel of, you know, good stab is kind of like the first hand testimony of Jesus, right? You know, if we're talking about like, you know, like alluding to or allegory, right, to the way gospels are told. The gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are written because they believe Jesus's testimony in the life of Jesus to be the absolute truth, and these are written this way because they believe that good stab's, you know, account is 100% true, and it's worth knowing and retelling. Except for, I guess, at the end, Etsy, you know, destroys the book because she doesn't want anyone knowing good stab's a vampire and out there. Which I really hated. I guess they left it open that like there could be more copies. Like Etsy acknowledges, like I just deleted what I could on my stuff in the shared folders and all that, but there could still be more copies out there, and I can only do what I can. I did really, really hate the way she handled it, though, with that woman who was kind of going above and beyond to send her the transcriptions. She's like, yeah, you can have it. And that woman, she's like, just give me like 10 minutes with it. And that woman was like crying. She was so thankful. And then Etsy goes in there and destroys it. I was like, that was a douche move. Because the woman told her. She even says, like, she said I could have it if I wanted it. I'm like, yeah, then why not do that? Like, why not just take it and then destroy it? Why lie to her and then destroy it? Etsy, honestly, and I think that's why she was written this way. I think she was written to be kind of a douche. Like, there's 3 things she does that is, like, just so, like, not well thought through and felt very, like, disrespectful and almost like she didn't know it was disrespectful. Like, she was so focused or hyper fixated on something that she didn't know how disrespectful she was being. The genuine buffalo head that she just leaves in her trashed apartment to be thrown into some auction or something. I'm just like, that seems very rude to me. Like, I get it. You might not want to keep that because it was horrifyingly menacing when Good Stab was like using it to disguise himself. At the same time, kind of disrespectful for like the significance of this animal and
after
what it
you
represents.
just got done reading the whole account and like what Good Stab's efforts were to save them, the death of Weasel Plume, these things,
exactly.
Like, and then it's like, and then, you know, the I agree, the and her character there, the only piece I think that was maybe from the author's perspective there on why he did it that way, or why, like, because she says along the lines of just gonna end up in a pawn shop anyways. I think that he was speaking to a very real thing that happens in towns that surround native reservations all around.
Billie Jean said this when I told her I was frustrated about this. Billie Jean said this exact point.
Oh yeah,
which I'm very interested. But go ahead, go ahead.
But you know, just the fact that, so like, I've talked to, you know, like one of my friends who's, he's a Choctaw. Anyways, he's like, we go out and you go to a, I'll back up. Family TPs are very important.
Yeah.
They've been passed down for generations. Also, a known fact, Native peoples really struggle with addiction.
Alcohol, gambling.
And so sometimes what they have, all they have left is that family teepee. they're going down to the pawn shop, they're pawning it, and then they are using it for that addiction. And so I think he might have been speaking to a piece of that, just like her remark of, it's going to end up in a pawn shop anyways, would be like how, really I feel like the only Native American art, or like even, the stuff from the 60s and 70s around Native art is just, it's all in pawn shops, like,
oh yeah,
this would be like a
which is so heartbreaking, but no, I know what you're saying. My uncle is very tapped into our Native American roots. Mm-hmm. He knows way more about it than I do. And he actually has a ton of like genuine Native American stuff because I just know was much more interested in it. And like when he would see it in a pawn shop down in Denver or something, he felt like, not that he had to rescue it or save it, but he was just very sad about it. You know what I mean? He was very moved by it. And I think he felt very torn because we're just a minority of like, we're a minor part of us is Native American. I think I'm a 8th or a 16th, or I think I'm a 16th. But with that, there's everything else, right? Like, and so like, I think for my uncle, he's not a very sophisticated man. But I do think like there is a very simple part of himself that recognized like 3/4 of me is the reason this is here. A quarter of me deeply wishes to know more and understand this more. And like have a better, and like wants to understand how to appreciate it. Not because I don't think he truly believes like the stone tomahawks he has and stuff hanging up are like divine holy relics. But I do think he truly sees them and believes like these were significant, and they are significant to someone, and these are as significant as like, if he were to hand me down a rifle.
Right. Yeah. I think this goes to like the lineage of people and the fall of nations piece, and where Good Stabs being a vampire, having to, what the metaphor is for him losing, that, and what you're talking about with, your nostalgia example, is very similar to that, where like even like another tiny example would be like, I think like even the, here's the little thing. Land O'Lakes butter. What was on Land O'Lakes butter?
Well, it was a kneeling Native American woman with feathers coming up from behind her head.
Right. What's on Land O'Lakes butter now?
I don't recall.
Nothing.
Really? They got rid of it?
So now I realize in the woke agenda nature to erase your racism and or and you're objectifying like this culture, to be like, this is, appropriating this culture by putting it on your butter. Guess what kids don't see anymore on their butter?
Native Americans.
Right?
Guess what kids don't see anymore in sports either?
Right. Exactly. And so like I don't know if the author's going for any of this either, but I do feel like there's this little piece of like, as you hold on to it so hard or try to change it or have it or not have it, you erase it even more. Just like the fact that like, yeah, okay, I feel like the people who were really who really earnestly felt like this was not supposed to be on the butter.
Yeah.
I feel like they came from in their own, however they arrived to it, their conclusion, they felt like that was what was right.
They're like, I'm helping.
Yeah.
I'm protecting.
Yeah. Well, guess what?
You erased.
There's erasure, now.
There's less of it.
Right. And so now there's like,
that's like the big reason why like there's something insane. It was like 300,000 signatures for the Washington Commanders to go back to being the Washington Redskins. Right. And a lot of those signatures were like from like national people. And so it's like one of those things where it's like, hey, the group that should be most offended wanted the representation.
Right. And like, yes, we're not going to like,
because like you said, it's erasure. It's like, no, like if you erase it, then like we don't have any representation.
Right. And turning people into a caricature, turning people into a stereotype. No, but at the same time, completely taking it, all away. It's like, same, I'd say like, I don't know, Uncle Ben's Aunt Jemima, not on the thing anymore.
Yeah.
Who is still? Quaker.
Yeah.
Quaker Oats, he's still on there. So who is getting, just in my little grocery store analogy, who's getting representation? The old white guy. So, which is, I don't care if he's on there, but it's just funny that the people who's so angry against the old white guy are also like, then the only person represented is the old white guy. And so, that's obviously a much broader, larger conversation, but I feel like it's a piece of this story that's deeper where you just go, as these things get forgotten, not passed down, untold, unrepresented, there's a loss, and so that's where you get that lineage of people and rise and fall of nations that go away. And I think that's what I think.
No, I agree.
And I think it's a shame. Like even like, I don't know, like quote unquote playing cowboys and Indians. Guess what? When I was a kid,
I loved being the Indians.
Exactly. I love being a cowboy, and
both were fun.
I love being the Indian.
Both
whatever, back and forth, the same thing. And
I definitely had more fun being the Indians I wasn't into cowboys until I got way older. Like I was out of high school before I was like, you know what? Cowboys are cool. But
exactly. And so
I loved I don't know. There's just something about throwing a plastic hatchet at people that feels invigorating.
Right.
Like noticing, like knowing when it's like, that's a good spin.
No, for real. And so I think it's a shame in those ways, to just not, it's erasing it, man. And that's that feeling you were talking about with like it's never going to be the way it was, the cheapening of things. And I feel that in my heart when it's like, it's a thing you can hardly explain, but you know it when you feel that feeling.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I do know that we're getting towards the end here, but so I have some key points here, and I'm going to read them off. And we've talked about quite a few already as we've been going through the rest of things, like we always do, right? Our key points are always at the end because we know we're going to touch on a lot of it while discussing other things like characters and themes. But I'm going to go through these. I got 12 here. And Pat, I think, pick out a couple that like were really memorable, whether it was like how visceral was written, or just the emotion in the scene or whatever that really kind of comes to mind. But so the key points in the story as I see them, I'm gonna say that the introduction wasn't really one, because at first I was like, what? Academic paper? What is this? Centennial? Am I listening to Centennial right now? For those who don't know, Centennial is a really massive book on the history of Colorado, and it's very entertaining. But the first key point: Good Stab and Arthur Bukarn meet. Second one: Good Stab's first encounter with the Catman, which alludes to the real life Marias massacre. Arthur's piecing of the puzzle. Putting together like the humps, which the humps is the phrase, the word used to describe these skinned people they're finding outside of Miles City, and they're skinned just the same way buffalo wore, and they're poisoned as well, just the way the buffalo wore, and they're also painted black and yellow. Good Stab's reunion with his father. Arthur comes to believe in Good Stab's confession. That pivotal switch from doubt to believer. Good Stab's descent from the cross. I thought that was like so cinematic, and that imagery will stay with me forever. Like I think that's the most memorable like movie scene, right? Or like TV.
You said Good Stab's coming out from the cross.
Yeah. Do you not remember this?
Refresh me.
There's a moment where Arthur is in his paranoia, and he's closed the doors. He's
jumping down from,
and he doesn't realize that Good Stab has been on the cross and
Yep.
he didn't notice that his Jesus was replaced.
Yes. No, yes. Sorry. I was thinking like that at some point, at a different point, Good Stab was like a crucifixion type scene. Okay. Yes.
I just picture I picture Arthur Bukarn, Bukarn sitting in a pew, stressing, and we see like over his shoulder, as he's looking at the door, like Good Stab out of focus, starting to move on the cross, and then he turns and looks, and he realizes Good Stab is slowly like coming to the ground, making no sound as his feet touch, and he realizes Good Stab has been on the cross this like whole night. That one really stuck out for me. Good Stab's second encounter with the Catman, like when we realize the Catman's introduced again, and of course the death of Weasel Plume, and as well as the child that Good Stab was kind of like not taking under his wing, but like very partial to. Arthur's ascent to the cross, which Good Stab puts him up on the cross to make him listen to the last of the confession. And then Good Stab's final encounter with the Catman, their final fight, climactic fight. It's awesome, but it's also very tragic, and it's the core of Good Stab's confession because that's what he wants to confess. Good Stab's final encounter. Oh yeah, sorry. His final encounter with the Catman. Arthur's final words. You know how he leaves off this journal. Etsy's reunion with her cat, which was kind of a surrogate Weasel Plume for her,
right?
As well as her reunion with her great-great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
And then finally Etsy's sacrifice, which is perhaps, you know, the absolution of Arthur. Those are the key points I see in this novel. Like those are the most impactful moments that we kind of have. And so we covered a lot of those. But I want to hear from you, Pat. Like, which one of these really stood out to you that like made an impact on you?
Yeah, I think that the part of the book with, I'd say, Good Stab's encounter with the Catman, the death of Weasel Plume, and then with the kind of conclusion of that, Good Stab being put in his ice prison. That is like a whole, that little chunk. There's full lot of meat in there, you know, and like we spoke about before, we were glad to see the Catman back just for the sake of story, right? Like what happened to that, you know? But also where it's there's a coming of age for the young vampire with the old vampires. Right? He learns some stuff. He's like, what am I? Why am I this way? Tries to fight him, you know? I
do want to fill in on that too.
Yeah.
The second encounter with the Catman is when the Catman has been feeding on elk.
Yep.
And he has the imagery of another Native American folklore creature known as the Wendigo. And the Wendigo is the spirit that possesses people who could resort to cannibalism. And it's always this thing with long arms, long legs, and a skull of elk and antlers coming out of its head. And I find the imagery to be very referential to that of like the Catman's been feeding on elk so long, his face is elongated and his arms and legs are elongated, and he's got antlers growing out of his head.
He is the Wendigo, you know, in that. And yeah, and it's a very like, yeah, I think so far as like horror goes, when he described what the Catman looked like at that point, I think that could have been the scariest part of the whole whole movie, aside from like the encounter with Arthur on the cross and like that whole thing. But like the Catman as this kind of freaky, elk man, and you know, obviously like he finds Weasel Plume dead and skinned, alive, still breathing. He trusted him, you know, and the only reason that he got skinned alive that way is because the bad man, the Catman, smelled like he did. So he came up to him and nuzzled him. It's like, it's a heart wrenching, like seeing this white buffalo. And the white buffalo is a, very important, significant, sacred thing, and so to be skinned alive, is like, I feel like the death of Weasel Plume was the kind of the metaphor for the death of the buffalo, like this, like to be skinned alive, like they were, the act of being skinned alive, like they were fine, everything was good, but they were just, and they were kind of still alive, after the buffalo hunters came through, after they'd been poisoned with strychnine and herds decimated and tribes were starving. They weren't dead yet, but they were skinned alive. They were still breathing. They're like, what happened? Why'd this happen to me? And it's like the fate was written. There's no coming back from that.
Yeah.
And so this, like, that piece in there is very key. And then as he went in, and then you have Good Stab goes into this ice cave prison after trying to fight the Catman and failing, because you can't beat the boss on the first go around, right? And just like very visceral scenes of like him just day in and day out trying to escape this ice prison, for me was like a very I don't know, like, well, I can't tie it to a metaphor or a deeper thing.
It was very tragic and horrific.
Tragic, horrific, and I think it's somewhat developmental, for Good Stab, as far as like once he came out of the ice cave, he was not the same as he had been going into it.
Yeah. I mean, there's that scene too where like another Native American is dropped down in from a different tribe, and he finds Good Stab, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Yeah.
And Good Stab reels and immediately drinks some from him because he's so starved. And like, it's horrific because what could have been an ally is completely out of Good Stab's control. Like, he has to feed, and so he eats an ally there. It's just very tragic.
And he comes out with renewed purpose, but of vengeance. Yeah. Before this, his mission in life was to survive and like keep the buffalo safe. After the ice cave, he has purpose again, but it's just kind of to find the Catman, defeat him, and seek vengeance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Final encounter with the Catman. Anything on that?
I think that we kind of touched on it, really, the way he turned him into a fish and got rid of him. And the, that'd be, I'd say that's the final, iteration of that. But his also, kind of like that whole final battle leading up to it, which is his ultimate confession, right? Which would be, what's her name? Kills in the Water.
Something
like that. But there's a girl who can't speak, who had taken care of Good Stab, who had looked out for him while he was imprisoned, and then ultimately, the only way to get rid of the Catman was to
use her as bait,
let her be killed, and for both of them to drink her blood. And like, so there was this dichotomy, be the wrong word, but like there's this duality of like the only way to succeed was to engage it, because basically this girl had this special blood that could make both of them powerful, right? But and so it was the only way for him, it's the only way he saw forward to protect his people from the Catman, to get rid of the Catman, was to sacrifice this girl. And that was his ultimate confession, and his most, that was the person he killed who he had the most, regret and guilt over. And so, and that's why he came to the priest, and that there was this dark side of this dark kind of like, menacing side of Good Stab that came to the priest and said, I'm making a confession, which is actually for your punishment. Confession. Yeah. You will confess to me. But the human side of Good Stab was, But there is one thing I actually really do have to get off my chest here.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that, right? And so I think that was obviously a very powerful point in the book, where Good Stab, that was his confession in that piece.
All right. So final takes here. I think this book it's up there for me in the great Westerns. It's of the books I've read, this has got to be one of the best point of views to understand like the Native American struggle during the Western expansion. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that this book uses the supernatural wrapping around it to tell the story of and make it in a way that you can empathize as someone who's not a Native American, who doesn't know the kind of passed down personal history of, what these people went through in their history and like their, what is it? I'm trying to think of the word. Not genealogy, but generational history. And I really think it does a great job, because by the end of it, I found myself deeply empathizing and understanding the anger, the frustration that Good Stab had, and why he did what he did. It doesn't make it good, but it makes it understandable. And so with that, like I think it was a very impactful book in that manner. And I think the supernatural element of it provides, honestly, that kind of pulpiness to make it fresh. Because it's telling this supernatural thing that we've heard so many times before, so many different vampire stories, but it's telling it in a way that is very, very new and unique. And it pays off really well at the end. So I really enjoyed it. It's a top book for me. Best book I've read that came out in recent memory.
No, for sure. And I think that going back to what we were talking about, the title at the beginning, if this was titled Cowboys versus Vampires, I would not have read it. This like Cowboys versus Aliens, that movie, whatever, like Cowboys versus Vampires, like I'd been like, yeah, no, because it's not that at all. It's a and I'm not even like that big or huge into horror, vampire, whatever stuff, but I do have fun with it. And I do think that the way this was done was, unless you're somebody who just really can't handle like violence and gore stuff, if you read it, listen to it, even if you've come this far with it, we've talked about the story and we've given you the bits and pieces and spoiled stuff. I think you'll understand what we're talking about if you listen to it,
Yeah. Well, hey, Ken, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. If you get a chance, go ahead and get yourself a Till Next Time from Anchorage Brewing Company. It's pretty dang good. And if you haven't read the book already, check it out, as well as check out the rest of Stephen Graham Jones's work. I'll definitely be looking through his catalog to figure out my next read. But again, we can't thank you enough for listening. Please leave a comment, let us know, leave a review on whichever platform you listen on. Pat?
Till next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this episode, drop us a review. If you have qualms or comments, leave us a voicemail on our website. While you're there, check out our latest news, merch, and deals from our sponsors. Till next time, Ken.